So we'll continue with the facial bones. There are 14 bones of the face. Most of them are paired, so that makes 8 names. Mandible, maxilla, zygomatic, nasal, lacrimal, palatine, 1 vomer, and 2 inferior nasal conchae. So we'll start with the mandible. It's really the lower jaw. It's a long, very strong bone. This is where the TMJ is. It's the TMJ is the only skull joint that is synovial, freely movable. So there's all kinds of parts to it. The mandibular angle is here. The coronoid process is here, and the word is coronoid, like as in horn-like. Corner is that. So it looks like a horn, is what it means. The mandibular condyle is part of the TMJ. The alveolar margin is the part that the roots of the teeth go into. The mental foramen is in the chin. So this is the mandible, the lower jaw. The maxillary bones, there's actually 2 of them, and they make up the upper jaw. They're like the sphenoid bone in that they articulate with all the other facial bones. So it ends up looking like this. There's the teeth of the upper half, so the alveolar margin. There is a bit that goes up here to beside the orbit. There's the floor of the eyeball. There's the part that attaches to the cheekbone here. And the nose is here. The nasal bone attaches here. So this bone and this bone are 2 separate bones. We call the processes, the part that stick out, by the name that of the bone that they articulate with. So this process here would be the nasal process. This process here would be the zygomatic process. This part of it makes sense. It's easy to see and it's easy to understand. However, it also comes here and forms most of the hard palate as the roof of the mouth. This is still considered maxilla. This bone here is the palatine bone, but each one of these. So, but this is maxilla. So most of the hard palate is maxilla. The zygomatic bones form the cheekbones. It's these bones here. Okay, they run basically from the zygomatic process of the maxilla to the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. Not only do they form the cheek, but they also form the lateral inferior quarter of the orbit of the socket for the eye. The bridge of your nose is formed by a couple of bones, nasal bones and lacrimal bones. And the lacrimal bones house the lacrimal sac, and there's a lacrimal fossa. Really, lacrima means tears. There's a famous wine called Lacrima Christi, which means tears of Christ. That's got to be pretty pure wine. So there's 2 little bones called the nasal bones that form the bridge of the nose, and then the lacrimal bones are kind of in the corners of the eyes, like they're in the medial corner of the eye. So if we look at it here, lacrimal bones are these green ones here, and the nasal bones are these blue ones here, one on each side. The tear duct passes down through here. So the palatine bones and the vomer bone really are deep. You don't get to see them very much. They form the back part of the palate, of the hard palate, and part of the nasal septum. Vomer means plow shape. There's only one of them, so that's this bone here, and it kind of links the sphenoid and the palatine bones here. The nasal passages pass through here. The palatine bones are here. They kind of are L-shaped. They extend up behind the teeth on both sides, and they go almost all the way up to the base of your eyeball. Now, in the lateral walls of the nasal cavity, there are three on each side. There are three things that look like seashells, and they're called conchae, which is seashell shape. And they're here. There is the inferior nasal conchae, the middle nasal conchae, and the superior nasal conchae. And what they do is they divide the air passages into three tunnels or meatus. There's the one here, the one here, and the one here, the superior, middle, and inferior nasal meatus. And what they do, by being seashell shaped, they spin the air like a Dyson vacuum cleaner, and it throws dust into this snot on the sides. It cleans the air, and it warms the air and humidifies the air. So it creates turbulence in here. So sometimes they're called the turbinate bones. Now, the superior and the middle nasal conchae are part of the ethmoid bone. And the inferior nasal conchae is a bone all of its own, and it's called the turbinate bone, or the inferior nasal conchae. This is the palatine bone. See what I mean? It goes all the way up to the sphenoid up in here. This is the pterygoid process of the sphenoid bone. When we look at the orbits, this is where most of these bones come together. Zygomatic, maxilla, lacrimal, frontal, sphenoid here. So this is where the muscles that move the eyeball are. This is where the tear ducts are. This is where the passageways for the optic nerve and blood vessels pass through. So there's fissures and grooves and canals and things. So 7 bones: ethmoid, lacrimal, maxilla, zygomatic, frontal, and sphenoid. The nasal cavity is an interesting place because it's formed by the ethmoid, palatine, maxilla, inferior nasal conchae, and that forms the lateral. The nasal septum is the ethmoid bone and the vomer bone and some cartilage, and it basically is, there's the 2 meatus or 3 meatus and 3 conchae. The superior is formed by the ethmoid bone, and that's the olfactory region. So that it's, again, same picture, it's here. So this is over just a little bit, so that the septum is in the picture. So there's the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone, there is the vomer bone, and this is cartilage. The nasal bone is here. There are sinuses. You'll notice a big sinus in the sphenoid, sinuses in the frontal, there's sinuses in the maxilla. And what they do is they lighten the skull and provide a resonance chamber for the voice. If you block the air passage through there, your voice changes completely. by blocking your nose. Anybody with a cold knows where the sinuses are.